Talksy Books, your bibliographic podcast.
Okay, so you guys requested a deep dive on, well, how to win friends and influence people. And honestly, my first thought was, isn't that like the book your grandparents loved?
Yeah.
But then I actually got into it, and wow, I get why it's a classic.
Yeah, it's amazing how much it still resonates.
Yeah.
You know, like even after all these years.
It's not just some cheesy self-help stuff.
Right. It really gets at something deeper. Like, what does it even mean to connect with people?
Exactly. And it's not just theory. I mean, the book's origins are fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
Carnegie, he actually started by surveying people, asking straight up, what do you want to learn? Like, what are your biggest struggles?
And you know what they said? Number one, health.
Makes sense.
But right after that,
Yeah.
it was understanding people.
Wow. So he really tapped into something universal. But here's what I find really interesting, Carnegie. He honed this by studying crazy successful people.
Oh, yeah. Some really fascinating figures, right?
Edison, the inventor. We've got Franklin D. Roosevelt, even Clark Gable. Talk about range.
Right. What do those people even have in common? A politician, a movie star, and an inventor.
It's the question, right? So what was that common thread?
Well, that's what drove him. And his conclusion, after all that research, all those interviews, he realized that this people skill, this ability to connect, it wasn't some elite gift, some magical thing you're born with.
Okay, so what was it?
He called it unused potential. Something we all have. Imagine that. We're all just walking around with this like untapped charisma, just waiting to be activated.
Okay, I like where you're going with this. So let's unlock some of that potential. One principle that really stood out to me, don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Sounds simple enough, right?
Right. Don't be a downer.
But then Carnegie, he hits us with this story about Two Gun Crowley. Now, I had to look this guy up. Notorious criminal.
Oh, yeah.
Like a bad dude.
The real deal.
And even facing the electric chair, this guy Crowley was convinced he was the victim.
In his own mind.
It's mind-blowing, but that's the point, isn't it? If someone that far gone can't even see their own faults.
It makes you think, right?
What are the rest of us? Our everyday blind spots? We're masters at justifying ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. We're all guilty of that. It's human nature, I think, to some degree.
So true. So how do we break out of that? If we're basically hardwired to deflect blame, how do we actually become less critical, less, judgy?
Well, Carnegie uses Lincoln, of all people, to show us it's possible.
Lincoln, I wouldn't have thought of him as someone who's quick to criticize.
Right, you think of him as this, steady, compassionate figure.
Yeah.
But early on, he nearly got into a duel, of all things, over this really harsh letter he wrote.
No way.
Yeah, he had this temper. He had to learn to manage that impulse to criticize.
Wow. So even Lincoln had to work at it. Okay, that's actually encouraging. It's not about being born nice. It's a skill we can develop.
Precisely. And think
Yeah.
about how relevant that is right now. I mean, think about our workplaces online.
Oh, tell me about it. Social media is
It's a minefield.
constant criticism.
Even in our families, right? Like every situation has the potential to trigger that critical voice.
Yeah.
But it's that moment, that pause where we choose empathy over judgment. That's where the real growth kicks in.
Okay, I'm with you on that. Less judging, more empathy. I'm writing that down. Now, another one that really resonated, especially these days, become genuinely interested in other people.
It's like the antidote to our me first culture,
It
right?
feels like it.
Yeah.
So how do we cultivate that genuine interest?
Well, Carnegie contrasts Napoleon, who, for all his power, had very few real friends.
Yeah, I can see that.
Versus someone like Teddy Roosevelt, known for charming everyone he met, right down to the staff.
He was known for that, yeah.
And the key difference, genuine interest. Roosevelt would playfully greet his servants by name as he walked by. These small gestures that made them feel seen.
And that genuine interest, it can have a real lasting impact. Carnegie tells the story about a lonely kid stuck in the hospital on Thanksgiving, scared, alone.
Yeah.
This young nurse goes above and beyond, even stays late just to keep him company, even off duty. And years later, he still remembers it as this turning point.
Wow.
All because someone took a real interest in him. Powerful stuff.
And it's true. I mean, everybody deep down craves that feeling of being seen,
Yeah.
being valued for who they are. But the question is, what about those times when we have to engage with someone?
Yeah.
Well, maybe not the most thrilling person in the world.
Oh, yeah. How do you cultivate interest then? That's the real challenge.
Sometimes you got to fake it till you make it, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
But the best way to do that is simple ask questions. Even if you're not personally invested, Ask about their life, their work, whatever they offer. Because everyone has a story, right?
Yeah.
You might be surprised at what you uncover, even in the most quote-unquote boring person.
I like that. A good challenge. Find that spark in everyone. Okay, on to a principle that almost feels like a superpower. Remember that a person's name is the sweetest and most important sound.
It's true. Names are so tied to our identity, right? It's that sense of recognition. Carnegie talks about this guy, Jim Farley, this political figure who could remember, get this, 50,000 names.
50,000, okay, that's next level.
Right, it's almost like a superhuman ability.
But he used it strategically. I mean, he built his career on it, right? Making people feel valued, building loyalty.
Exactly. And it wasn't just some natural talent. He worked at it. Even someone like Napoleon III, he had a whole system for remembering names. He'd repeat it, he'd visualize the person, write it down.
So effort equals results, even with something like that.
It's a skill anyone can develop.
And it's so applicable even today. I mean, whether it's customer service or just trying to, stand out in a crowded room, remembering names goes a long way.
Absolutely, especially in a world that's increasingly digital, right?
Right.
Remote teams, global connections.
Yeah.
That personal touch, it matters.
It shows you're not just going through the motions. You see them, as individuals.
Exactly. Speaking of which, this next principle, it's huge. Talk in terms of the other person's interest. It seems so obvious, right?
It does.
But we forget.
We do.
In our fast-paced world, we're so focused on getting our own point across
Getting to the point.
that we forget to even ask.
It's true. Okay, so how do we put this into practice? I'm ready for the challenge.
Pay attention. That's the biggest thing. What are they emphasizing? What language are they using? Even small talk,
It holds clues.
Don't be afraid to just ask directly, like, hey, what are you passionate about outside of work?
Right. It's amazing how people light up when you give them that space to share,
Totally. It's like you're giving them permission to be themselves, even for a few minutes.
I love that. Okay, this next principle, it feels like the golden rule, but it's amazing how often we miss it. Make the other person feel important and do it sincerely.
We all crave that feeling, don't we?
Deep down, I think so.
No matter who you are, what your background is, that feeling of being important, valued, it's powerful. Carnegie tells this great story about George Eastman, the founder of Kodak, this titan of industry.
Yeah, I know Eastman.
You think, someone like that, at the top of their game.
Hard to impress.
But he was completely won over, not by flattery, but by genuine appreciation. This architect, Adamson, he designed Eastman's office, and he really admired Eastman's inventions, his philanthropy.
So he was genuine about it.
Oh, yeah. And guess what? He landed a $90,000 contract.
No way. See, that's what I'm talking about. It's not just about being nice. It leads to real, tangible results.
Absolutely. It builds trust. It opens doors.
But this brings up a question for me. Where's the line between sincere praise and, manipulation?
Ooh, yeah, that's the danger zone, right?
Because it's a fine line sometimes.
It is. Carnegie has this other story about Marie the dishwasher, this woman who everyone kind of overlooked. But she's told that she has these hidden treasures, even though she didn't fit conventional beauty standards, right? And it totally boosts her confidence, changes how people treat her. But it makes you wonder, was it ethical to plant that belief?
Right.
Even if it had good outcomes.
That's a tough one. It's a good reminder, though, that influence is powerful.
Oh, it is.
And we have to use it responsibly.
For sure.
So how do we walk that line? How do we give praise that's genuine, not just empty flattery?
That's where specific compliments are key. Instead of just vague praise, focus on a specific action, skill, quality. It shows you're paying attention. It makes it real.
Okay, I like that. Specific, actionable compliments. Noted. Now, this next one, it feels almost counterintuitive, especially for those of us who,
Like to be right?
Well, I was going to say overachievers.
Yeah.
But yeah, talk about your own mistakes before criticizing the other person. We are wired to do the opposite.
It's true. It's like our instinct is to get defensive,
Absolutely.
right? But it's about psychology. When you admit your own flaws, it disarms people.
Yeah.
Carnegie talks about this actor, Leon Errol, known for playing these, bumbling characters.
Okay, I think I know who you're talking about.
And he would use that.
Yeah.
Right. Like, he'd admit mistakes in this self-deprecating way.
Yeah.
And instead of getting angry, his boss would laugh, be more forgiving.
He turned it into a strength.
Exactly.
So leading with humility can make feedback easier to swallow.
It's like you're saying, hey, we all make mistakes. I'm not perfect either. It creates a more level playing field.
Okay, lead with humility, then offer feedback. Got it. This next principle, it's about respect. Even when things get tough, let the other person save face. What do you make of that one?
It's about recognizing that everyone has an ego.
Right? Oh, for sure.
And when that ego is threatened, it creates resistance. Carnegie tells a story about Charles Steinmetz, this brilliant engineer,
Okay, I know Steinmetz.
but terrible manager.
Right.
And GE, they knew they couldn't fire him. Too valuable. So what'd they do? They gave him a new title, consulting engineer, let him focus on what he was good at, but took away the management responsibilities.
So elegant.
Right.
They solved the problem without, crushing the guy's spirit.
No humiliation involved. It's about finding that balance between, accountability and empathy.
Right.
You can address an issue, even offer criticism, but you do it in a way that preserves dignity.
So it's not about avoiding conflict, it's about navigating it with grace.
Exactly. And that's a skill we could all use a little more of, right?
In all areas of life.
Especially for leaders. Imagine creating a culture where it's safe to make mistakes, to learn, to grow.
That's powerful. That's where the real magic happens, I think.
For sure. And it's interesting because from here, Carnegie, he kind of shifts gears. He starts talking about winning people over to your way of thinking. And he starts with what seems like a total contradiction.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Hit me with it.
He says the best way to win an argument is to avoid it entirely.
Oh, okay, that's not what I was expecting,
Well-
because we're so conditioned to see arguments as these battles, right? You gotta win, you gotta prove your point.
Right, it's like this instinct, right?
Totally.
But Carnegie's saying, even if you win, you might lose something way more important, the relationship, the goodwill.
Oh, that's a good point.
Because most arguments, they're not about logic, right? They're fueled by emotion.
Oh, 100%.
We get stubborn, we cling to our beliefs, even when we know, deep down,
We might be wrong.
exactly. Trying to change someone's mind with just facts rarely works.
It's like that saying, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Carnegie, he tells this great story about this hot-headed salesman, Patrick J. O'Hare, this guy who learned this the hard way.
Yeah.
He'd argue with customers, get all worked up, and of course, kill his sales. Until one day, he discovered the power of agreement.
Wait, hold on. So if a customer was like, your product's garbage, he'd just be like, yep, you're right.
Not literally, but kinda. He'd say something like, you know what, you're right, it's not for everyone, and I respect your opinion.
Okay, so he'd validate their feelings, even if he didn't agree with their conclusion.
Exactly. It's about disarming that defensiveness. And you know what? Often, they'd end up buying.
Get out of here.
Because he shifted the dynamic. It's not about being a pushover. It's about understanding that people need to feel heard before they can even begin to open their minds.
That is so true. And it makes me think about online arguments, they almost never change anyone's mind. But if you start from a place of understanding,
It's a totally different ballgame.
it is. You might actually connect with the person.
Exactly. And this ties into Carnegie's next point show, respect for the other person's opinions, even when you think they're dead wrong.
Ooh, it's a tough one.
It is, right? But Ben Franklin said it best. If you argue and rankle and contradict,
Yeah.
you will never get your opponent's goodwill. And that goodwill, that's the foundation of any strong relationship, right? Business, personal, doesn't matter.
It's everything. Okay, so how do we do that? How do we show respect for opinions we disagree with?
Well, instead of saying, you're wrong, try this.
Yeah.
I understand your point of view, or
Yeah.
I see why you feel that way. It shows you're engaging with their perspective,
Mhm.
not just dismissing it out of hand.
It's like you're saying, I respect your right to have your own opinion, even if I don't share it,
Exactly.
which is more likely to lead to, a productive conversation.
Right. It's about finding that common ground. Carnegie tells this great story about how he got this really stubborn tax inspector to reconsider his assessment. And you know what he did? He didn't argue the numbers, he engaged with the process.
Interesting.
He acknowledged the complexity of the guy's job, the challenges.
He appealed to the inspector's expertise instead of attacking his conclusion.
Exactly. It's about understanding the why behind someone's opinion,
Yeah.
even if you totally disagree with the what.
Okay, I'm getting that. Now, this next one is a tough one because it goes against our very nature. Admit when you're wrong.
Oh yeah, this one's huge. And it's so hard.
Our instinct is to defend ourselves. Right?
100%. But Carnegie, he says, if you're wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically, own it.
Be direct about it. Don't sugarcoat it.
Exactly. He even tells this funny story about getting out of a traffic ticket by just immediately owning up to his mistake. No excuses, just a sincere apology. And the officer let him off with a warning.
Wow. See, Honesty, sometimes it really is the best policy.
It's about short-circuiting that whole defensive reaction that we all have. Think about you're receiving criticism at work. Who would you rather deal with, someone who immediately gets all defensive or someone who says, you know what, you're right, I messed up there?
Okay, no contest. The person who takes ownership, instantly more credible.
Right. Like you can trust them, to be honest.
And then that builds trust, which is what it's all about. Okay, I'm really feeling this next one. Begin in a friendly way. I mean, it seems obvious, right?
It does.
But how often do we just jump right to the negative, especially like...
in emails.
In emails.
Yeah. Or text messages. So easy to fire off a terse response, right?
I'm not even thinking about the tone.
Exactly. But Carnegie, he gives the example of John D. Rockefeller Jr. Now this guy, he was dealing with a tense labor dispute. Coal miners.
Oh, wow. High stakes.
Right. And instead of coming in with threats, demands, he visited their homes. He listened to their concerns. He started with empathy. And guess what? He diffused the situation, negotiated a peaceful resolution.
It's a good reminder that kindness can be more effective than force, even in those high-stakes situations.
It's huge. Lead with warmth, not aggression.
Love it. Okay, what else does Carnegie have for us? I'm ready for more wisdom.
Well, he talks about this idea, the power of yes, yes. And his point is, if you can start with points of agreement, even small ones, it creates this momentum. It's not about manipulation. It's about finding that common ground, that bridge.
Because you're both starting from the same place, right?
Exactly. He gives this example of a salesman trying to rent out a ballroom for an event. And the hotel, they wanted to triple the price. Crazy, right?
Oh, yeah, that's rough.
So what does he do? He doesn't argue about the price. He reminds them of all the benefits they'd gained from his previous events, how it drew a good crowd, how it was good for their image.
He found that? Yes, yes.
Exactly. Like, we both want what's good for business, and guess what? It worked. They compromised. Win-win.
I love a happy ending.
Right.
So it's about finding that shared ground first. That's a good takeaway for anything, really.
Negotiating a salary, making plans with friends. It applies across the board.
It really does. Okay, this one seems so simple, yet we screw it up all the time. Let the other person do a great deal of the talking.
Oh man, it's so hard, right?
Yeah.
We're so quick to fill the silence.
We are. It's awkward.
But Carnegie, he tells this story about having dinner with this famous botanist, and he was fascinated by the guy's work.
So naturally, he just wouldn't stop talking.
Right. Just kidding. He mostly just listened, asked questions, let the expert share his passion. And guess what?
The botanist was like, this Carnegie guy, he's a genius conversationalist.
Right. But the reality was he was just a brilliant listener.
I love that. Sometimes the best way to make an impression is to let others shine.
It's about shifting that focus from me to we.
Which ties into this next principle, right? Let the other person feel that the idea is his or hers. Because let's face it, nobody likes being told what to do.
Right. We resist it, but
We're way more open to ideas that we feel like we came up with ourselves.
100%. We all want to feel like we're in the driver's seat. So how do we encourage that sense of ownership in others?
That's the million-dollar question.
Well, Carnegie gives an example of this sales manager trying to motivate his team. They got this big, challenging order, and everyone's kind of dragging their feet.
Yeah, been there.
Right. So instead of just barking orders,
Yeah.
he presents it as a challenge. He's like, hey guys, we've got this opportunity. How do we think we should tackle it?
He turned it from a demand into a collaborative puzzle to solve.
Exactly. And you know what? It worked. The team, they felt empowered. They came up with these creative solutions. They crushed it.
Because they owned it.
Exactly. And it's a powerful lesson for leaders, right? Sometimes guiding is more effective than dictating.
Oh, that's a good one. It makes sense when we feel a sense of ownership over our work, we're naturally more invested in the outcome.
It all comes back to that feeling of ownership. You tap into that, and it's amazing what people can achieve.
It's like that shift, right, from you have to do this to let's figure this out together. So much more powerful, especially for teams.
Absolutely. And it's a good reminder, even when we're in a position of authority, sometimes leading with that collaborative spirit, way more effective than just barking orders.
Engagement over dictation. I like it. Okay, so what else can we learn from Carnegie's playbook? I'm ready for more.
Well, he talks about the importance of really stepping outside our own heads
Ooh, that's a challenge.
with this principle. Try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. Sounds obvious, right?
It does.
But in practice,
Much hard.
way harder. Because we're so stuck in our own heads, right?
It's like that old saying, we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. Our biases, our experiences, they color everything.
100%. But making that effort to understand the why behind someone's actions, their opinions, even if we don't agree with them.
That's where empathy comes in.
Exactly.
It reminds me of that story Carnegie tells about trying to negotiate a lower rent. And this landlord was known for being tough.
Oh, yeah, I think I remember this one.
So what'd he do?
Well, instead of just pleading his own case, oh, I can't afford this, he actually wrote the landlord a letter.
A letter. That's bold.
But in the letter, he acknowledged the landlord's perspective.
Yeah.
The expenses involved, the responsibilities to other tenants, he found that common ground.
And it worked.
It did. The landlord, he was so impressed by the fact that Carnegie actually, got him,
He understood where he was coming from.
Exactly. That he lowered the rent.
Wow. So even in a situation that feels purely financial, just a little empathy goes a long way.
Further than you might think. It's a good reminder that most things aren't as black and white as we make them out to be.
Oh, for sure. There are always different sides to every story.
Layers of context.
Exactly. And that ties into another principle Carnegie talks about. Be sympathetic to the other person's ideas and desires.
It's about taking that empathy a step further. Recognizing that everyone's carrying around their own stuff.
Their own invisible struggles.
Carnegie tells a story about getting this, irate letter from this woman. She was furious about a factual error he'd made in one of his broadcasts.
Oh, so high stakes. How'd he handle that?
With kindness. He wrote her back, acknowledged her frustration, sincerely apologized for the mistake. No defensiveness, no trying to minimize it.
What happened? Did she unleash another angry letter?
Nope. She actually wrote back, apologized for her tone, said that no one had ever acknowledged her feelings that way before.
Wow. It's amazing how disarming a little compassion can be, even in a heated situation.
Right. It's like it just diffuses the whole thing.
It makes you wonder what the world would be like if we all just led with that a little bit more often.
Right.
Okay, so what's next? What other wisdom does Carnegie have for us?
Well, this next one feels especially relevant today. Appeal to the nobler motives.
Okay, break that down for me. What do you mean by that?
It's about remembering that everyone, deep down, wants to be a good person, wants to do the right thing. Carnegie gives this great example about John D. Rockefeller Jr. This guy was constantly hounded by paparazzi.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Right, and this was even before social media.
Oh, totally. The pressure must have been immense.
It was. So you'd think he'd hire more security, threaten legal action.
Right, the typical playbook.
Exactly. But instead, he appealed to their humanity. He reminded them, hey, you guys have kids too. Imagine how this constant scrutiny would feel for your own children.
Wow, that's powerful. And it worked.
It did. They backed off. It's about appealing to people's better angels.
I love that, reminding them that ultimately we're all in this together.
Exactly.
Okay, what else? I'm ready for one more Carnegie gem.
All right, here's a good one. Dramatize your ideas.
Ooh, I like where this is going.
Don't just tell them, show them. Make it memorable.
Because who doesn't love a good story?
Exactly. He gives this example of this salesman. He's trying to convince a store owner to upgrade his cash registers. These things are ancient. But the owner, he's resistant to change. So instead of just listing features, benefits the store. The salesman grabs a handful of pennies and he throws them on the floor.
No way, he did not.
He did.
That's a power move.
Right. Of course, the store owner is startled.
I bet.
But it's the sound of all those pennies scattering, hitting the floor.
That takes it real.
Exactly. Drove home the point, all the money he was losing with his outdated system.
Okay, that's brilliant. Sometimes you need to shake things up a little bit, create an experience.
Engagements, it works.
Okay, I'm inspired. I'm ready to go throw some pennies around the office.
Do it. No, but seriously, it's about engaging people's senses, not just their minds.
Love it. All right, last one. Hit me with it.
Okay, this one's about tapping into that human desire to prove ourselves, to rise to the occasion.
Okay, I like it already.
It's called Throw Down a Challenge.
All right, I'm listening.
So Carnegie, he tells the story of how Theodore Roosevelt was convinced to run for governor of New York. And at first, he's hesitant. Big decision.
Totally.
And this savvy political operative, he knew exactly what to say. He basically told him, look, is the hero of San Juan Hill going to back down from a challenge?
Ooh, he went there. Appealed to his ego.
He did, and it worked. Sometimes a well-placed challenge, especially one that speaks to someone's values, their aspirations, it can be incredibly motivating.
It's like you're framing it as an opportunity for growth, not a burden.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a good one to end on.
It is. But you know what? There's actually one more principle that Carnegie ends with, and it kind of ties everything together.
Okay, lay it on me. I'm ready. What's the final word?
Beginning with praise and honest appreciation.
So simple, yet we forget.
All the time. Especially when we're focused on like giving feedback, pointing out areas for improvement.
It's easy to jump right to the negative.
Right. But Carnegie, he stresses the importance of setting that positive tone. He tells a story about how Abraham Lincoln dealt with one of his generals. This guy, Joseph Hooker, known for being super critical of others.
Ooh, yeah, that's a tough personality to manage.
Right. So instead of reprimanding him, Lincoln, he actually starts his letter by praising Hooker's skills and ambition.
So smart. You disarm them with the positive first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like it opens them up to then hear about areas where they could maybe improve.
It's like that sandwich approach. A positive, then the constructive criticism, and then you end on a positive again.
Exactly. And that, to me, is what makes How to Win Friends and Influence People so brilliant. It's about remembering that we all crave that connection, that validation, that respect.
It's about our shared humanity.
Yes. It's not about tricks. It's not about manipulation. It's about showing up authentically.
I love that. So it's not about changing who we are. It's about being more mindful of how we interact with others.
Exactly. And the best part is, these are skills that anyone can develop.
With a little practice.
It just takes practice and that willingness to see the best in others.
This has been incredible. Honestly, I feel like I could talk about this all day. But for the sake of our listeners, who I'm sure are just as eager to dive into Carnegie's wisdom as I was,
Please do.
we'll wrap up here. But seriously, if you haven't already, grab a copy of How to Win Friends and Influence People. And even if you've read it before, there's always something new to discover.
It's a book that can truly change your life, one relationship at a time.
And on that note, we'll see you next time, folks. Ready to dive into another fascinating topic together.
Talksy Books, your bibliographic podcast.